Hey everyone, and welcome to my January reading wrap up. First of all, short announcement. My neighbors are doing construction work, so if you hear any noise of like drilling and hammering throughout this video, I'm sorry. But anyway, my reading wrap up for January. I started off my reading year of 2019 really well. I was in an amazing reading mood and I managed to read 13 books in the first month, which I'm very pleased about. And I also really read a very wide range of books. I read ebooks, I read physical books, I listened to audiobooks. I've read middle grade, fantasy, historical fiction, thrillers, basically something of everything. So yeah, I was really pleased with that, and I really hope the rest of the reading year will be just as amazing. So yeah, let's just get started with my wrap up because I have a lot of books to talk about, and yeah, this video is going to be long enough, so let's just get into it. The first book that I finished in 2019 in January is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a YA thriller and it tells the story of a 19-year-old girl named Sadie. Her younger sister Maddie was murdered a couple of years ago, and this book is about Sadie going out on a sort of mission that is related to that, and that's all I want to say about the plot. The interesting thing about Sadie is that this book is told in the form of a podcast, so it's about this journalist who goes on investigating Sadie's disappearance, and he does interviews, and it's a sort of like radio show podcast, so that's what makes it very unique. I actually listened to the audiobook of Sadie, which is a really great audiobook experience because you can really hear it like a podcast. And the narration was amazing, and they have different voices for all the different characters that are being interviewed and such. So if you want to read this book, the audiobook is definitely a big recommendation for me. So Sadie was of course a very popular release last year, and I can understand why, because I really enjoyed this book as well. It's a thriller, it's very emotional, and it's also pretty heavy at times, but I love the story and I loved discovering it throughout this podcast, and I felt so much for Sadie, and it was so sad, so tragic, but also a very strong story or like message. It is definitely not a happy feel-good book, so be prepared for that if you want to read this, but I thought it was written so well, and yeah, it really grabs you and it really sort of got me, and I kept thinking about it days after I finished. The one thing I will say though is that a lot of people said that the ending was very surprising, but to me it actually wasn't all that surprising. I don't know, I sort of could guess the direction the book was going halfway through, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it's still a very yeah, how do I say this, important story. But personally it wasn't that surprising to me, so if you're looking for that, I don't know, maybe it will be because a lot of people have said that, but yeah, that was like my experience. But overall it was still a very good book, as I said, and I gave Sadie 4 out of 5 stars. Then after that I sort of spontaneously decided to, in January, do a mini readathon of Roald Dahl books. So I loved to read Roald Dahl when I was a child. My mother read them to me because she loved those books as well. And I saw a couple of those books available on my audiobook subscription service, and I decided to listen to them. And I had a really good experience listening to all these childhood favorites again, and I still knew these stories so well. But I will say though, as my sister like phrased it very neatly, Roald Dahl is a bit fucked up. Like, the things that are happening in these books are really not that child friendly. Like, there's child murder and abuse and all that sort of stuff. It's not really that like child-proof, but yeah. I feel like you don't really notice that until you're an adult, but these books are pretty weird at times, but like I still really enjoy them. So now I will give like a quick review of all the books that I read. The first one that I listened to was Matilda, and this one was especially fun because it was narrated by Kate Winslet. Matilda, of course, is about a young girl named Matilda who is very smart, but her family treats her very badly, and then she finally goes to school and meets a very nice teacher, Miss Honey. Matilda was definitely my favorite. It always has been my favorite because, of course, like a lot of big readers out there, I could really relate to a young girl who loved reading so much. The story was a lot shorter than I remembered, but I think that's mostly because of the movie, because the movie expands the story a little bit, but the book is pretty basic, but still it's amazing, and I just love Matilda so much. It's really sweet, and I gave Matilda 4 out of 5 stars. Then next I listened to The Witches, which was also narrated, I have forgotten her name, but it is the actress who portrays Rita Skeeter. in the Harry Potter films. So that was a weird experience maybe, but she did a really good job as well. So The Witches is about our world, but there are witches who live in secret, but their biggest mission is to like murder children because they hate children, and the main character and his grandma get sort of involved in that. So The Witches, I think that was the first Roald Dahl book that I've ever read. Like, my mother read it to me, and when I read it as a child, I was terrified because I was so scared that a witch was going to get me. Like, the things that are happening to children in this book is not okay, and I was genuinely terrified that a witch would come to kill me. So that's what I mean with these books aren't that child friendly. But of course, now that I reread it, I wasn't afraid anymore because now I'm an adult. So, you know, they don't want to kill me anymore. I dodged a bullet there. Whew, that's fortunate. But yeah, The Witch is also like, it's a good story. Like, Roald Dahl wrote good stories, and again, it's like a lot more tragic and a lot more horrifying than you would think from a children's book. But it's again a classic for me, and also this one I really enjoyed, and I also gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last Roald Dahl book that I listened to was, of course, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Another one that I read as a child many times, and this one is very whimsical, and of course it's about this big chocolate factory and Willy Wonka, and 5 children get to go inside and see the like amazing chocolate things and everything. This book always makes me hungry for chocolate because it's described so deliciously, so you know, you want chocolate immediately. And again, not that child friendly always, but you know, I think this one is the most whimsical and the most magical out of all the Roald Dahl books. And yeah, what can I say about it? It's still very well written, and I still really enjoyed it. And I gave Charlie and the Chocolate Factory also 4 out of 5 stars. And then now we're getting to the first very negative review of the year, because after that I read the book Wild Like Me by Louise Pentland. So Louise Pentland is a YouTuber. She makes like lifestyle videos and such, and also about motherhood. She has 2 children, 2 daughters. I love watching her videos. She seems like a very lovely person. So, you know, I really wanted to pick up her book because it sounded like fun, and I really wanted to love it, but unfortunately I did it. Wild Like Me is about a woman named Robin Wild. She is a single mother. She has a 6-year-old daughter, and it's about her navigating life and about her feeling this sort of emptiness. And yeah, there's not really much of a plot, so that's my first disappointment of this book. It's just describing Robin's life, but there's not really one like big problem apart from that she feels sort of empty inside. Just like sort of read her diary, so that makes it boring after a while because her adventures aren't really that interesting, and you're supposed to feel sorry for Robin, but I don't know if you're supposed to feel sorry for her, but like the things she goes through aren't that special in my opinion, or like that difficult. Because there comes the second problem. Robin Wild as a main character is horrible. All she does is complaining and whining about everything. Basically, Robin Wild is one of the worst, most selfish main characters I've ever read about. Her entire world revolves around herself. She's constantly feeling sorry for herself. Like sometimes she thinks about her daughter, but it's all about her, and she has very little sympathy for other people. And the thing is that there's really nothing that much wrong with Robin's life. So Robin, she has the sweetest daughter who always behaves really nicely. She has a job that she likes and that she's actually very good at, and throughout the book she gets even more successful. She has amazing friends and family nearby who can help her with stuff and who are there for her. But Robin Wild still has a very miserable life according to herself because she isn't in a relationship. The amount of time in this book that she whines about not being in a relationship and how that's so difficult, like it's so annoying. And at the end of the book that sort of thing gets a little bit better, but not that much. And at first I thought maybe the book would be about sort of like depression and how you can feel depressed even though everything in your life is going fine, but nope, that's definitely not the case. So like, if that's the thing, then I'm just not feeling sorry for the main character. And apart from that, the book was just boring. As I said, not much happens, and it was a hot mess, and I'm so sorry because I wasn't even expecting that much. I was just expecting a fun sort of chick lit, but I was still disappointed. It was really not that good. I'm sorry. And I gave Wild Like Me 1 out of 5 stars. It just wasn't that good. The next book in this wrap up is another reread, and it is You by Caroline Kepnes. This book is about a man named Joe, and Joe is a stalker. he sees this girl named Beck and he becomes obsessed with her and goes to very extreme measures to sort of win her over. It is very creepy, and it's also told in the sort of you form, like the book is talking to you as if you're the one being stalked. I read this book a long time ago, before I even had a booktube channel, and I really enjoyed it at the time. And of course, the Netflix show is now available. I watched that, I really enjoyed it, and that is what made me want to reread this book again. This time I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook is actually narrated by the actor who voices Prince Hans in Frozen. So yeah, that was also interesting, but he has a very relaxing and soothing voice, even though he was like portraying a very creepy guy. But yeah, it's so deliciously creepy. I love it. I love thrillers like this. The writing is really good and the characters are all very flawed, not that likable, but that is what makes it fun. And I gave you 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read was The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. I read this during the 24 in 48 readathon. I have a reading vlog with my first reactions. Link to that down below in the description box if you want to watch that. But The Tattooist of Auschwitz is about a Jewish man named Lally, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And he's being sent to Auschwitz, and there he gets the job of being the tattooist, of being the tattoo weaver, I believe that's how it's pronounced. So he has to tattoo all the prisoners with their number, and it's about his story of survival and also about him meeting a girl that he falls in love with. So this book is all based on a true story. Lally, or like, sorry, that's how you pronounce it, I think, was an actual person. This is his actual story. Like, not everything is 100% historically accurate, but like the story is very much true. And I absolutely love this book. I think it was such a powerful story and message, and I enjoyed every single bit of it. I think it's always so impactful to hear about these individual stories from Auschwitz. Like, so many people suffered so horribly, and then to read about one person and his story, and I think like it left a big impression on me. And I think it's very important that these stories get told and that people learn about that. And yeah, I felt very sort of honored to learn about his story. And the writing was very good. Like, it's a very easy way of writing. The book is very easy to get into and very easy to sort of read quickly. The only thing I will say, and that's mostly the case with true stories, is that sometimes things go a bit quickly because of course there's an entire story to tell. And yeah, I think maybe this book could have been a little bit bigger, but yeah. It is not my new all-time favorite historical fiction book, but that's because my sort of expectations for historical fiction are like really high, so it's really hard for a book to be like a 5-star read for me. But this was still definitely a 4-star read. It was a beautiful story, and I love books like this, and I think I will always love historical fiction books about World War II. So yeah, 4 out of 5 stars, and it's definitely a recommendation if you want to read an impactful story about Auschwitz, and yeah, I can definitely very much recommend it. Then my next read of January was The Wicked King by Holly Black. This is the second book in the, I don't know what it's called actually, the Cruel Prince series, I guess. And this series is about a human mortal girl named Jude who gets transported to Fairy, and she grows up there, and it's about her sort of involving herself in the schemes of the fairy court, and it's very dangerous, and yeah, it's full of dramatics and fairy enchantments and all that sort of thing. This is the second book in the series. I really enjoyed the first book, so I definitely wanted to know what would happen next. For me, the thing with the Cruel Prince series is like a lot of people really love it or find it really overhyped, and I'm somewhere between, like in the middle. I don't think this book series is like of the best quality ever. Like, it's pretty cliche at times. So this isn't necessarily like my new all-time favorite book series, but it's just so much fun to read about. Like, with all the schemes and the drama going on, and yeah, it's just fun to read about this sort of cliche fairy story. And just have a good time. That's sort of my opinion on this entire series, and I had the same thing with The Wicked King. I will say though, the first half was a bit slow, like not much was happening, and it was a lot more boring. But then after that, a lot was happening, and yeah, I was really into it, and it just like, I couldn't stop reading it, and I had a really good time. And then the ending of this book definitely caught me by surprise. I did not see that coming, and I was very much intrigued. So I really want the next book in the series now, because I want to know what happens next. And yeah, I think to me this is a very fun book series. I love it, and I can also understand why people hate it because it's not that good, and I can also understand why people love it because it's very enjoyable. So maybe sort of like a weird opinion, but yeah, that's what I think of it. And I gave The Wicked King 4 out of 5 stars. Maybe it's more like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. And yeah, I will definitely finish this series. I believe the next book will be the final one. Then next I have An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. So this book caught me completely by surprise. This book was so different from what I had expected it to be, but in a very positive way. So An Absolutely Remarkable Thing is about a girl named April, and one night she finds this sort of mysterious statue on the streets of New York City. She makes a video with this statue, she names it Carl. And then the next day she goes viral because those statues have been appearing all over the world. And then the rest of the book deals with her fame and like becoming famous on the internet and such. But it's also about the Carls because no one really knows what the Carls are. And it gets a bit sci-fi and a bit dystopian somehow. It is very hard to explain because this book, it is so weird. Like, I really didn't know this book would be so weird. I thought it would be a contemporary about like internet fame and going viral as such, and that's still the case. I will definitely give it that. This book is a lot about fame, about social media, about like things like that in the world. And I think it says a lot of important things about that, and I really loved reading about it, and I just think it was done so well. But then on the other side, there's also this weird sci-fi-ish thing. And somehow I was really digging it. Like, I was really enjoying it. It really builds up gradually. So it's not like you're thrown into this weird book. You start off with a relatable situation, and then it gets weirder and crazier. I could not put this book down. I loved it. I loved all the hidden messages in it. I loved all the things it said about internet and fame, and I just had such a good time reading it, and I just wanted to keep on reading it. This book is so unique. Like, it's not like any other book I've ever read, and for me it was a really good thing. But I can also definitely see why some people might hate it. I feel with this book it's really a hit or miss. It really has to be your sort of thing. But for me it was a hit. I loved it, and there's actually going to be a sequel which I'm going to read immediately when that one comes out. And I gave An Absolutely Remarkable Thing 5 out of 5 stars. The next book was again a reread, and it is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, a very popular YA book that you've probably heard of. Six of Crows is the first book in a duology, and it's about well, these 6 outcasts who go on a mission to a very secured prison, and yeah, it's about all these different characters and them trying to make money off this mission somehow. Like, it's hard to explain, but it's a very good book. The first time I read it was like 2.5 years ago or something, so I had forgotten most of it. And of course there's now a new book in the Grisha universe, King of Scars, so that's why I wanted to delve back into the Grisha world before I would read that one. So I listened to the audiobook, and yeah, I had a really good time listening to Six of Crows, reading this book again, experiencing this book again. And I had forgotten so much that I was genuinely surprised by some of the events, so that was fun. The writing in this book is amazing. The characters are so good. I think that's definitely the best part of this book. All these amazing characters from different backgrounds with different stories. This book is very popular with a reason, and yeah, I think just everything is right about it. I will say though, there's just something about it that doesn't make me give it 5 stars. I don't know exactly what it is. I cannot really pinpoint a certain thing that I don't like about it, but it just didn't grab me as much as it does with a lot of other people. But still, I think it's a very good book, a very good YA book. So fleshed out, so enjoyable, so interesting. And I gave Six of Crows, just as I did the first time, 4 out of 5 stars. Then for the last section of this January wrap up, I actually read some Dutch books by Dutch authors this month. If you don't know, I am Dutch. That's why I have this sort of weird accent. So that's my first language. I normally don't read in Dutch, but this month I did. By Dutch authors, so no translations. I don't really like translations. And I know this information won't be useful for everyone because of course a lot of you guys aren't Dutch, so you cannot read this. But yeah, if you're not interested in my reviews of those books, then you can click away right now. But I know that there are also a lot of Dutch people among you, so and if you're just interested in hearing me talking about it, then you can stay. But from now on, the last 3 books were Dutch books. So the first book that I read was Gapen onder water by Refka Bell. Gapen onder water would translate as yawning underwater, and the title is a reference to something the main character says, like it would be like yawning underwater, it's a lot of trouble and it only hurts, or something like that. This book is about a girl named, oh god, I've forgotten her name. Veda, her name is Veda. She's in her 20s and she doesn't really know what to do with her life. She isn't really like, she doesn't have a stable job and she feels like she's just drifting around. And her best friend is really successful. So that makes her feel a bit jealous, and yeah, it's just about her life and her dealing with that. I love this book because of its writing style and because of its relatability, and yeah, it was just a very enjoyable read. It was also a very quick read. I read it in like an afternoon. That's the only thing. I think it could have been a little bit longer because at the end you're still just sort of questioning some things. But yeah, a good book and definitely something I would recommend to you. It's only available in Dutch, so if you're Dutch, I can definitely recommend it. Then the next book that I read in Dutch is Zondagskind by Judith Visser. And Zondagskind would translate as Sunday's Child. This book tells the true story of the author about her growing up with the syndrome of Asperger, but she didn't get diagnosed until she was already an adult. So her entire childhood she dealt with the fact that she was so different and that she had trouble connecting to people, and that she actually liked dogs way better than people, and that she had trouble like speaking and basically everything people with Asperger deal with, but she didn't have any help, or she didn't have a lot of understanding from like her school and such. Yeah, this book is about her from age 4 until 18, about her growing up, and it was so beautiful and so good. I loved this book to bits, and I loved the main character, Jasmijn Vink she is called. It's like the true story of the author, but the names are changed and it's a bit more fictionalized. It was so interesting to see in the head of a child with the syndrome of Asperger, and how some things that might be logical to me aren't logical to her, and how she sees the world differently, and how hard it can be if other people don't know about that and don't really understand it, because she deals a lot with people saying that she's just complaining and just overreacting. She grows up in the 80s and the 90s, so when it wasn't like a big known deal as it is now, and that's the only thing I can say about it. I loved it. It was so good. I think this is a book that everyone should read, but unfortunately that's not possible yet. So it's available in Dutch, and it is going to be translated in German. So that is a thing that is happening, I know. Maybe, who knows, someday it will be translated into English, because it is a very popular, successful book here in the Netherlands. So yeah, who knows, I hope so. And if it ever does, I will let you know immediately. But Zondagskind was definitely a 5 out of 5 stars for me. It was just really good, and I felt all the emotions and I could not put it down again. Because I loved Zondagskind by Judith Visser so much, I decided to read In Seizoenen by Judith Visser, which would mean in seasons. It's about a man named David in his 30s, and his mother gets diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she has to think of her life in seasons because she doesn't have very long. But his mother, Annabelle, is not going to accept that, so she's going to fight as hard as she can, and she goes to a hospital in Belgium. And this book was also very well written, but the thing is that this book wasn't that special or mind-blowing to me. Of course, it's very sad, but books like that, stories like that, I've read many times, and this book didn't bring anything new, and it was just a bit basic. And yeah, also at the end there were a couple of unanswered questions, some plot points that didn't really go anywhere, and I didn't understand why they happened. So it was a good book, a fine book, but nowhere near as amazing as I thought Zondagskind was. So yeah, it was enjoyable. Well, like enjoyable, of course, it's sad with cancer and such, but yeah, not that special in my opinion. And I gave In Seizoenen 3 out of 5 stars. So that was it for my giant reading wrap up of the month of January. I feel like I've been talking forever, but yeah, I just read so many books and I love it. And yeah, this was it now for this video. If you like this video, please let me know, or subscribe or give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. Please let me know your favorite book that you've read this month. I would love to know. And hopefully I will see you again very soon in my next video. Bye!